Germany has sold their Bitcoin. Mt. Gox is distributing to its creditors. There's sell pressure everywhere. But how much does that sell pressure actually matter? Let's have a look at on-chain data and let's try to find out where the price of BTC might go and what really matters for the development. Because here's something that might not be that intuitive. Just because there's a lot of news around something, just because a lot of noise is made, just because many people look at a certain topic, does not mean that it actually matters for price discovery, especially for a large asset like Bitcoin. Let's have a look at how much Bitcoin moved out of the German government's hands and how much Bitcoin got moved to the Mt. Gox creditors over time. So this is the Mt. Gox trustee balance. It moved from 142,000 Bitcoin to currently 79,000 Bitcoin. So a bit less than half has been distributed. Now have a look at this comparison. This is the Mt. Gox balance change in red versus the German government balance change. The German government sold roughly 50,000 Bitcoin. Mt. Gox has distributed so far 62,000 Bitcoin. So how much of all of supply got moved? The answer is 0.5% roughly. 0.5% doesn't sound too bad, right? And the price development during that distribution also reflects that actually the impact hadn't been that massive. Again, look at this, right? The price went down and then it went up again. And the distributions tended to happen rather when the price was going up. So when it's not the German government that's moving the price and when it's not the Mt. Gox distribution, I believe it's the behavior of two classes of investors. It's on the one hand, the long-term holders, the diamond hands, the whales that own a lot of Bitcoin. And it's on the other hand, the very short-term speculative money. Check out this chart here. This is the value days destroyed multiple. And whenever this peaks, the price tends to also not rise that much anymore. Last time when it turned red, on the 11th of March, that was incredibly close to what's currently the all-time high. And we've seen this indicator flashing red also in other price peaks. So this doesn't seem to be random. Now what is this indicator? What does the value days destroyed metric measure? It's a metric that looks at what did the long-term whales do. As in, when you've got say 10 Bitcoin and you don't move those 10 Bitcoin for say 2 years. And then after 2 years, you decide to sell those 10 Bitcoin or to move those 10 Bitcoin. On the day when you sell the Bitcoin, you are destroying 20 Bitcoin years, right? So the more Bitcoin you hold and the longer you have held it for, the more value days get destroyed. And whenever this metric peaks, it means that the whales suddenly move. The people that tend to be diamond hands and that tend to be heavily invested, they suddenly move their Bitcoin. Thus, when those people that are normally diamond hands suddenly become paper hands, then it might make sense to become a paper hand oneself. At least that's how I use this indicator. So long-term holders selling is bad. It's not necessarily what we see now, but those kind of peaks impact the price much more than a little bit of selling by Mt. Gox or by the German government. Now, when we don't look at the long-term holders, but at the short-term traders, you can see the exact opposite. So instead of timing the tops, we want to time the bottom. And whenever the realized HODL ratio is low, we tend to be very low in the price as well. So the value days destroyed is good to measure tops. The realized HODL ratio is good to measure bottoms. Now, what does the realized HODL ratio do? It looks at a ratio of two numbers. First, the number of transactions or the number of Bitcoin that gets transacted within the wallets that hold Bitcoin between 1 to 2 years versus secondly, the wallets that hold Bitcoin between 1 to 2 weeks. So it looks at the short-term trader activity relative to the long-term holder activity. When the short-term traders are not interested in Bitcoin at all anymore, when the hype has completely died down and the market is 100% at apathy, that's, I believe, the best time to buy. And again, that's the time when the realized HODL ratio is low. Currently, it's not super low, though there's still some kind of attention. Long-term holders aren't necessarily selling, but short-term holders aren't flushed out of the market either. And so what does this mean? I believe Bitcoin isn't super cheap, right? It's below the realized price. The average cost basis is at around 31,000. I also don't think that there's a lot of hype now. We are pretty much now in no man's land. I don't believe the numbers justify to be 100% all in Bitcoin. If you don't own any Bitcoin whatsoever, then by all means simply continue dollar cost averaging in and be fine when the Bitcoin price drops by another 50%. Just continue to buy at those low prices as well. If you already have a lot of Bitcoin allocation and you took advantage of this rally, then maybe it makes sense, if you're currently over allocated, to rebalance something, right? To buy things that have low correlation to Bitcoin. Not necessarily other cryptocurrencies, because crypto in general is very highly correlated, right? They go up and down at the same time. But maybe things that aren't that much correlated. So things that are other asset classes. So that could be property, that could be stocks, that could be gold, it could be long-term government bonds, it could be anything that simply doesn't move with the crypto cycles. I believe it's important to follow some kind of systematic approach, to have some data to trade with, to not just follow the news, because again, the news might not necessarily talk about the things that really matter. Mt. Gox and the German government did not really move the prices. The Bitcoin ETF, by the way, also doesn't really move the price that much, at least the direct purchases by the ETF. In the last 4 months, we have seen acquisitions of the ETFs by roughly 0.2% of the entire Bitcoin supply. So that's even less than what Mt. Gox distributed or what the German government sold. I'm trying to share the data and the approaches that I believe matter regularly on this channel. If it's the first time here, feel free to subscribe. A like would be very much appreciated as well. It helps the channel grow. Feel free to also share this with your friends. If you've got Telegram, feel free to join us. The link is down below. It's 100% free. Looking very much forward to chatting with you. Cheers.